go ahead and start. Anna is recording, and you guys just got that announcement. We are recording this. We've started doing this pretty regularly because we get a lot of questions about the recording, and there's people that can't join at the last minute. So we're recording this. We will send out a thank you email or an email after this with Fred's slides and also the link to the recording. We've moved our recordings to a YouTube channel, so they stay alive for quite a while. And then I thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cindy Olson, founder of ESA, Executive Strategic Alliance. And for the past 6 years, I've worked side by side with ADP to build this thought leadership network. And what our objective has always been is to deliver really world-class thought leaders that think about the future. And today, we have over 1,200 participants in 20 cities. And in the last year, Anna Randazzo and John Fink have joined me, and we're expanding what we're offering our network beyond just the thought leadership. We'll be rolling out in January a couple of new ESA website and a couple of new offerings. First is the opportunity to be a work tech startup advisor, which we've been doing now for about 6 months, and we're making sure that everyone in our network has the ability to join us as a startup advisor. And we bring to our network startups that, quite frankly, are kind of the next gen technologies of the future in the work tech space. And then I'm really excited about our board positioning membership. We started out having a really strong relationship with Deloitte through Thought Leadership, and then they asked if we wanted to nominate some of our network to their board readiness program, and that gave us the idea and the opportunity to create what we're calling a board positioning membership, because it's not just a public board that people are interested in. They're also interested in private board seats and startup board seats. So we want to offer a kind of one-stop shop for you to find your ideal board seat, whether it be a public board, private board, or startup. And that you'll get more information from us in January on that. So today, I'm really excited about this topic. We were just talking about that before we started. We're fortunate enough to have Fred Hencke, who is with Segal. He's going to be sharing the predictions around talent, culture, and technology for the next 3 years. He's also going to be talking about the predictions he had 3 years ago and what things came true. So I think you'll be interested to see that somehow he has a crystal ball, okay? Fred is a transformational and innovative thought leader focused on helping organizations improve business results, implement and operationalize business strategies, and achieve a high-performing workforce. He's currently a senior vice president at Segal. And prior to Segal, he held positions with Buck, Accenture, Hewitt, and Bearing Point. We also have 2 amazing CHROs, one from Dallas, one from Houston. Amy Messersmith is currently the Chief Human Resource Officer and Communications Officer for U.S. Anesthesia Partners. She serves as a member of the executive leadership team and trusted advisor to the board, the Anesthesia Partners board. Before joining U.S. Anesthesia Partners, she was the CHRO for TD Industries, the Chief People Officer of Pizza Hut Incorporated, and she held progressive leadership positions with PepsiCo, Frito-Lay of North America, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Accenture. And we also have Laura Ramey, who is, and by the way, she's in the Newark airport right now. I can't believe that she's taken the time to do this. So thank you so much. Laura currently serves as the VP of HR for TRC. She was recruited to join this portfolio company of New Mountain Capital to drive the organization to become an employer of choice. Prior to TRC, Laura was the Senior VP of HR and Communications for SGS, where she was recruited to transform HR. And prior to joining SGS, was recruited as the first company's HR leader for Crestwood Midstream Partners. She also held roles prior to Crestwood at Parker Drilling, CGG, Insperity, and Burger King. So you can see we've got a great panel of two wonderful CHROs. And then Fred, it's all yours. You take it away, okay?
Great. I'm going to do a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, hey, thank you, Cindy and ESA for this opportunity to lead this discussion on what's appearing on the horizon for organizations related to talent, culture, and technology. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can read the tea leaves from time to time, and my team has done a tremendous job on the research side of that. I'd also like to thank Amy Messersmith and Laura Ramey for helping to prepare for today and for their willingness to share their valuable perspectives during today's webinar. There are going to be plenty of opportunities to do that. So my research team, including Amanda Baker and Chelsea Belt, who are on this call and providing technical support, again, they did a tremendous job on the lagging indicators, which what has happened in the last 3 years is there evidence of that, and the leading indicators, which sort of point to the future, and we're going to cover quite a few of those today. So Segal is new to ESA. I watched a few online events ESA has recently sponsored and was super impressed with the thought leadership and genuine interest in advancing the effectiveness of our workforces, keeping up with the evolving workplace, which is changing daily, and improving the very nature of how we work. Segal is a business HR and benefits consulting company headquartered in New York City, and we've been around since 1939. Our mission to provide trusted advice that improves lives requires us to have some perspective on where things are going. And that's the 10-second commercial. As a management and HR consultant, I found myself trying desperately to keep up with the pace of change. And so much is changing almost daily. I started my career as a software engineer, spent a number of years in software development and as a product development manager, and side-doored my way into management and HR consulting. That story would take a long time to tell, so I won't tell it here, but I really wanted to be closer to the end users and the operations of the business, and more importantly, to influence the decisions that were being made, ultimately seeking ways to better equip, enable, and empower high-performing teams. So before we move on, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and for bringing your own curiosity and perspectives about the future. And you're going to have plenty of opportunity to share those. And for you movie buffs, set the dial on your DeLorean to 2019. So first, we're going to go back in time to 2019 and briefly review predictions that we made 3 years ago. These were developed before the pandemic started. We will then review a subset of the lagging indicators directly related to these predictions. Next, we're going to reveal predictions for the next 3 years, along with leading indicators pointing somewhat to the future. The appendix, which is really, really detailed, has a much richer set of lagging and leading indicators. And as Cindy said earlier, you're going to get a copy of this deck. You can go through those at your leisure. Today is really meant to be conversational, less presentation, more conversation. So be ready for some polls that'll get the conversation started, and hopefully some really great discussions that are going to follow. So moving on to the 2019 predictions. So how many times have you gone back in time to evaluate whether or not a prediction came true, or at least in part? Today we're going to do that. In 2019, we developed a top 10 list of predictions after reviewing several analyst reports. By the way, I think I got 6 analyst reports in the last week predicting what's going to happen next year. So they just keep flowing in. We interviewed several clients, and we applied our own experience. And the 10 I'm about to share with you, these are all happening right now to a large degree. So moving on to number 1, the nature of work in the workforce will drive changes to traditional organizational, staffing, employee value proposition, engagement, policy, and total reward strategies. That's a mouthful. We're experiencing remote and hybrid work like never before, along with what's being termed the Great Resignation. These are becoming lightning rods for change. Number 2, wellness strategies and solutions will become broader in nature, including health, financial, career, emotional, balanced life. Well, wellness is really transitioning now to broader well-being, including all of these things, including not just emotional, but mental as well. Number 3, voice of employee will drive organizational program, process, policy, and system design. Well, employee experience and design thinking are now mainstream. We're all using them to some degree. Number 4, generational challenges will take a new turn as more baby boomers retire. and millennials assume more managerial and leadership responsibilities. Learning and development will focus on preparing younger generations for these roles. Well, we experienced a significant retirement surge during the third quarter of last year for many of the reasons that we know. That's really accelerating the need to pass on to the younger generations institutional knowledge, leadership, and managerial skills. And finally, on this, number 5 on this page, Gen Z will begin to reject always on and available technology as they view it as harmful to their physical and emotional health. Well, there are many signs that this is beginning to happen. And scientists are also discovering the impacts to our sleep if we stay on our devices right up to bedtime. Disrupts our sleep patterns. So moving on to the final 5 on the list of 2019 predictions. Social movements will redefine diversity and inclusion. Now remember, this prediction was made back in February of 2019. And we had some social movements that had happened starting in 2014, but they really ramped up in 2020. Of all the predictions, this one really stands out and has seen the most activity and movement towards tangible changes to address social justice. Number 7, analytics are moving towards predictive, requiring collaboration of business leaders, IT operations, HR, and finance and accounting. Well, the pandemic accelerated the use of predictive analytics in a big way, especially for health, business operations, and supply chain issues. We're still experiencing those today. Number 8, digital HR will peak within the next 3 years, then transition to the next trend, which will include elements of design thinking, artificial intelligence, and robotic process automation. And we're seeing so much of that in our daily lives today. Number 9, culture will reemerge, but in a different form. Bottom up versus top down. Team-based cultures are now being examined very, very closely. And then finally, number 10 on our 2019 predictions list, continuous feedback will replace the traditional annual performance management cycle in stages. Well, for sure, we're now seeing a transition to continuous feedback. And if we can move on. So now it's time to hear from you. Over the past 12 months, what has your company introduced to holistically address employee wellness and well-being? Again, the physical, mental, emotional, and financial health. If you could use your annotation, or I guess your reactions feature of Zoom and select one and place it up near the option that most closely resembles what you're doing today. And we're asking you to select all that applies, so you may need to do more than one. So since well-being is such a hot topic right now, and rightfully so, how is your organization addressing it? Enhancing EAP programs, telehealth, other? Are folks able to use
Fred,
the?
I don't know that this is working because I tried. Oh, yay, there's somebody that did it.
Good. We got a check mark there. Okay.
Yeah, yay.
Let's give it a minute. Okay.
Hey, and while we're giving it a minute, can I just correct something? Laura Ramey's title, it's my bad. Laura's actually the EVP of HR and the CPO currently, and I made a huge mistake. Sorry about that, Laura.
It looks like we have a good representation on this list. Yeah, somebody used a line to draw. Awesome. Couple of check marks on telehealth, 3 check marks on telehealth. Yeah, we're seeing a big ramp up there for sure. Cool. Work schedule flexibility. Nobody has selected other.
Why not?
Okay. Well, with that is if anyone has something else that they're doing right now that's not on this list, we'd love to hear from you either in the chat area or the Q&A area, or if you want to come off mute on and come on in live and talk about it, that would be awesome. Chelsea, anything in the chat or Q&A area?
Nothing in the chat so far, Fred.
Okay. Well, it looks like fitness and nutrition programs, telehealth. Yep. Really good representation here. So we should probably move on in the interest of time. We got a lot to cover here. So digging into these 10 predictions made back in 2019, the nature of work in the workforce will drive changes to the employee value proposition, et cetera. 31% of HR leaders think their employees are satisfied with their outdated employee value proposition. In 2022, salary increase budgets are estimated to be nearly 4%. The highest rate.
Fred, really quick, sorry. Cindy, is there any way to erase those check marks? Do you know? Just as on the slide. You guys can see those still.
Ah,
Thank you so much. You can.
yep. And then, so Amy or Laura, if you wouldn't mind, one or both of you weigh in on this question. What steps are you taking within your organization to enhance and improve the marketing of your EVP? And if you wouldn't mind spending a minute or two kind of also talking about your organization and how these things kind of fit into your organization.
I'll be glad to answer this. And, we're just coming out of recapitalization. We have a new PE owner, Warburg Pincus, as of last week. I am up here in New York and this was a topic of our first meeting yesterday, was all around people. And I was pleasantly surprised that, when we talk about the value creation, it's all around people. And we as a leadership team every 5 years work on our 5-year plan. And one of our pillars is around people. And we rewrote our vision mission statement specifically around, the employee experience. And as far as compensation goes, we took a healthy approach to it this year. Our fiscal year ends in July. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve this year. And it was very well received.
Well, thank you for that. Amy, anything you want to share?
Well, thank you. So we are an anesthesia provider company. The vast majority of our employees are actually clinicians who are in operating rooms across America today, keeping people safe and thankfully not remembering what's happening to them in the operating room. So it's a very geographically dispersed workforce, and it's not a workforce where people are coming into buildings we own. We don't own the hospitals. They're going into the hospitals' facilities and working inside of those environments. And so we have used a couple of tactics this year over the last 2 years, really, to try to elevate and create visibility to the proposition that we think is important. But one of the techniques I've leaned into more lately is what I just call linking and labeling, right? So when we are putting out communications or we're implementing programs, we'll start everything off by saying, because you, our incredible team members, told us this is important to you in the engagement or in the pulse survey or in the national focus groups. This is why we're doing this, right? Because I think so often in the noise of life, companies are trying to respond to the desires and the feedback from their team members, and not always getting credit in the hearts and minds of team members, because they may not realize those actions are being taken because that feedback said that it was important to the team members. So linking and labeling, we've tried to be much more intentional about that in our communications efforts, both internally and externally. We have also taken a step back and tried to really strengthen the connection and the narrative between how we're recruiting in the market for talent and then how we're actually hearing and understanding the daily experience to be inside the organization. We want those things. We want what we promise on the front end to be true once they're in the organization and they're having that daily shared experience. So we've taken a step back to evaluate that, to strengthen the ties between that pre and post-employment message and narrative, and to really hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're delivering on the proposition that we were communicating and promising in the beginning. And then, the last thing I would say is we have invested further in some technology this year to help make our proposition and our offerings just more accessible in an easy way. And so those have been 3 things that we've done. I will tell you, I feel on this particular question, we have so much work left to do. I feel like we're barely scraping the surface of it, and would love to learn today what others are doing also.
So Chelsea, anything in the chat area or Q&A area?
No, sir.
Okay.
Hey, I'd like to add too that as we recreated our EVP, we created groups with amongst the generations. We brought the generations together within their groups, and we really let them have input into it and blended it together. And it was really interesting, the different things that were important to each group, and how we blended it together to ensure that we had something that was really collaborative across 4 and 5 generations in our workforce.
Yeah, that's terrific. So thank you, Laura and Amy. We're gonna touch on this a couple more times before we're done today, but thank you for that. So the second prediction, wellness strategies and solutions will become broader in nature. 77% of companies have added or enhanced virtual medical services, and many of you checked those off earlier on the poll. 47% plan to add or enhance support for financial well-being, helping folks develop a savings account. And putting money aside is not discretionary; it should be non-discretionary to some degree. Budgeting, getting the discretionary versus non-discretionary spending, getting out from some heavy loans or poorly structured loans, and just general counseling around financials. And 73% are really looking to plan or boost support for mental health. There's so much stress, so many stressors, and so much stress building up underneath the surface. 40% of people polled recently indicated that they have some form of mental or emotional challenges. Burnout is resulting. Many organizations have had to run very, very lean for a while. Not to mention, we have a labor shortage that in many industries that it's hard to find people. So the folks that remain have to take on double duty in many cases. That's brewing as well. And of course, the depression that comes from all of that. Number 3, the voice of employee will drive organizational program, process, policy, and system design. And you can see there are a number of different channels here. Amy and Laura talked about the surveys and the town halls, focus groups. Another thing that's really on the rise are business resource groups. These are folks that are getting together in a voluntary way to tackle issues or to plan for the future and provide another sounding board. So Amy or Laura, I'm gonna come back to you with the question, what employee listening channels are working best for you now? And how have you leveraged them the past 19 months in particular?
I'd be happy to jump in and then definitely want to hear from Laura. We've used surveys a lot, just good old fashioned surveys and pulses, because there were, as we've gone through the last couple of years, there have been things we needed to tap into and understand. Where are people at on this particular issue? How are they feeling? And candidly, just our ability to leverage our surveying tools and tabulate that and quickly analyze the results has been very helpful. We've also leaned in on town halls, and most of them have been virtual, but we've increased our frequency of them so that we could create more of an intentional cadence of being together. Recognizing that the virtual world has a lot of benefits, but it also has some strains to it, the isolation. So we've really leaned in on that. And then I will tell you though, I think the thing that has served us best this year is just returning to the basics and recommitting to the basics. Effective quality one-to-ones with your team members, effective team meetings, ensuring that the functional leaders and the big team leaders are not just relying on the company town halls, but they're holding their own sub-team all hands meetings and creating those meaningful interactions. We've, and in my opinion, that has been the most effective, those one-to-ones and those all hands meetings at more of that team-based level has been the most effective two-way listening device we've had.
Yep.
It has fully brought forward for us the intel that we needed to know how to structure our return to on-site work plans. We have, I think, been able to dodge many of the great resignation bullets that I am seeing impact certain organizations kind of adjacent to us, because we've been able to stay intentional and close in this hybrid environment. So some of the key ahas for us through this process has been just how much improvement we've seen in overall productivity, which I think if you had told us, 2.5 years ago, hey, you're going to send your workforce largely home across certain groups, and they're going to become even more effective, we would have said that doesn't at all sound right. But that's in fact exactly what happened. And it's led us to, in the non-clinical aspects of our business, it's led us to a more permanent flex work structure, because we now know that, people can do it, and it's what they desire to do more frequently. So I will also say stay interviews have become very important, and checking in those high quality conversations and gleaning some insights from what we're hearing there. We just had our board meeting earlier this week, and we talk about those insights. These things are being funneled up to important decisional tables, and so these are some of the things we've leveraged, Fred, that have been most helpful.
Well, terrific. And before we move on to Laura, just one question related to the working with a remote team as a manager or supervisor. That didn't come naturally to all of them. And so anything in particular you've done to kind of equip managers or supervisors to be remote managers and leaders?
We did. We developed some webinar training and lunch and learn content that over really the course of 2020, we ran pretty consistently, pushed it out through our LMS, really had our HR business partners lean in locally, checking in with those managers. Because you're right, that's a very, very different way of leading. And particularly if you're an individual who can sort of become engrossed in the work and forget about those interactions and making space for them, if you don't have the water cooler to interrupt your day. So we actually took some intentional time to train and reaffirm those foundations. Now, the thing that I've got on my mind now is, as we're now in this, people have said for a while, hey, it'll be great when the new normal emerges. I think we're in it. I think this is what it is. This is what it is for now, right? And so now that we're in this more permanent flex arrangement where hybrid or remote is just a part of our reality, I feel we've got to turn our attention to our higher level leaders, our VPs, our big functional leaders, because there's something about leading high performing organizations and promoting culture and doing it in this new world that I feel like we need to tap into. So that's a gap yet for us.
Well, thank you, Amy. So Laura, anything you want to add to that?
A lot of things that we're doing too, Amy. I'd love to talk a little bit more about this. We really started when we saw what was going to happen in February of 2020. We launched very early in March a number of initiatives. We pushed virtual town hall meetings out to each business line, each function. We had a corporate town hall meeting. And it was more than just what the business was doing. We tried to pull in different topics about remote working, connecting with others, services available. We have a people committee that I lead, and we relaunch it every year in January with new team members. And I really relied on my people committee members to talk to the teams that they represented. And, they helped drive a lot of the communication where people were struggling. We created some work from home. I don't want to call it a policy, but kind of some rules of engagement so that we could help our employees understand, what work from home really meant, what the flexibilities were. I was really worried about our working parents, not just our working mothers, our working grandparents, because everybody was helping with this home from school. So we have a women's grow committee that I also lead, and we put on a series of webinars, and we took some of our working parents, those with infants, those with college students, high school, grade schoolers, and we had an incredible response. It was open, very similar to this, about, how can I manage this? What have you done? Sharing best practices. We also created virtual affinity groups. We ask our employees, hey, what do y'all like doing? And we put together things like we had a gamer group, we had a crafting group, we had a cooking group, we had a book group, and those groups continue even to today. They're very, very active. I ran a pulse survey every 4 to 6 weeks, and it was really, it was all about how are you? What can we help you with? Do you need to talk to somebody? And then I would respond personally to all of those requests and hand them off where appropriate, but not knowing the nature of the request, we couldn't just let anybody and everybody handle those if it involved private health information.
Right.
At the same time, we ran virtual lunches, virtual coffee hours, virtual happy hours. We had virtual live music from a group out in Austin, and we would invite the whole family to participate. And then we launched 2 programs. We piloted them in one of our groups, and one was called Rise, which was our hypo community, because we knew that people coming in today that maybe never met anybody, interviewed virtually and was brought in, really needed that extra guidance. It was more than just a mentoring program. It was really, what does it mean to be a high potential? And then we also launched our lead program, and we took a different approach, Amy. We started at our lower level managers and really helped them to understand and train them about working in a virtual environment. But I think, and then we also did skip level interviews. So, the business unit president, for example, and the business partner would start doing skip level stay interviews to get to learn what was going on in the business, where people were struggling, what was working, and then sharing that information. So this is an area where we really put a lot of focus in, and we put it in very early, and it continues today. Thank
Terrific.
you.
Well, Laura, thank you for sharing that. And Amy, so I have a feeling we could spend the entire hour on this topic alone. It's so important. And there's some comments coming in the chat area around, flexibility is the key. Extra costs related to the new services initiatives have paid off in the end. Absolutely. So we're gonna move on here in the interest of time. So this next poll, what are we doing to enhance the employee value proposition? I think we're going to skip this one in the interest of time, because we want to get to the next 3-year predictions. So Chelsea, if we can move on to slide number 8. And I'm not going to drain this one because, again, we want to kind of pick up some time here. So generational challenges will take a new turn as baby boomers retire. We spent some time on this, but what I think is interesting here is the millennials, what they aspire to be as leaders. If you'd asked me this question 30 years ago, I think I may have answered a little differently. Coach and mentor, 47%. I won't drain these, but they're very revealing and they're very relational in nature. Number 5, Gen Z will begin to reject always on and available technology. 60% say their generation spends too much time on their screens, and 53% of them feel bad about it. And 50% blame technology for being distracted. I'm assuming that means distracted at work or in conversations with others. And 36% feel less productive. So, Amy and Laura, if I could ask you to really briefly share what you're doing or how you're encouraging less active screen time, if you're doing that at all, and more downtime throughout the week with your workforce.
I can jump in here if helpful. So with our clinical workforce, dealing with the clinical burnout and just morale issues that are very, very real. Everything you've seen in the news is very real. We've really, really encouraged, listen, when you're off, be off, right? We've really done everything we can, even inside of a labor shortage, to try to make sure people are not on call, for example, after they've had a long schedule pull. So asking people to lean into that and to take some personal responsibility as well for put it aside, right? And if we'll find you if we need to find you, but otherwise assume that, this is your time to replenish and renew.
Yep.
On the business side of things, I will tell you I think this remains an area of opportunity for us. Now, across the teams at large, I think we've done a better job of creating expectations that we want people to step away. And yet what I hear from many of my people who are still in remote settings is, I work all the time just because it's right here. So we're having to learn a new muscle memory as an organization about how to draw boundaries. And that's becoming something that's very clear to me we need to focus on. I think at our higher level leaders, I think in that space, there's still quite a bit of connectivity. There's still quite a bit of reticence to step down, or just candidly on the part of some leaders to disengage so that others can step away. So we've got to work through that. Those are some cultural wrinkles, but it's very much on the radar.
Well, thank you, Amy. Laura, anything you want to add to that?
I would agree 100%. We're experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Well, moving on to number 6, social movements will redefine diversity and inclusion. There's so much just going on about this right now. I think the stat that's very, very revealing, 67% of people state racial and gender diversity are factors in their next job search. So as we're thinking about becoming more attractive to a very tight labor market, we must keep that one in mind. So Chelsea, if we can move on, I think we're gonna skip this next poll in the interest of time, and move on to 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm not going to drain these because I want to get on to the future predictions. Analytics are moving towards predictive. Well, you look at that compounded annual growth rate of investment in predictive analytics tools, over 20%. By 2027, 6 years from now, almost 5 times what was spent on it in 2019. Number 8, digital HR will peak. Well, at the end of the day, if you didn't have a functioning core HR system and workforce management system in your organization when the pandemic hit, you really, really struggled. And if you didn't have analytics on top of that, and maybe some automation on top of that, it was really, really challenging. And I think these past 19 months have really pointed to investing in AI and RPA and analytics, and you can just see us going through the roof. Number 9, culture will reemerge, but in a different form. 20% of outperforming companies are experimenting with new culture initiatives, such as rolling out short lists of priority behaviors. And we talked earlier about team-based cultures. We'd like to think we have top-down cultures. I think what's really important is having top-down behaviors and what does great look like, but we're always going to have some element of team cultures, and we need to be sensitive to that. And finally, number 10, continuous feedback will replace the traditional annual performance management cycle. And I want to go right to the bottom. Only 2% of workers who have weekly check-ins say they are disengaged. That is a huge, very revealing stat. And if we can move on to the 2022 predictions. So let's have a look at what's on the horizon. And I'm going to ask you to set your dials on your DeLorean to 2025. These things are starting to happen now, and in the next 3 years, we really believe they're going to take off. And we're going to see a lot of change, and they're going to shape a lot of change moving forward. So labor shortages will continue for several more years, and it's going to affect some industries more than others. We believe that public-private partnerships are going to ramp up to meet the growing demand in skills trade, IT, a variety of other fields. Some think that this labor shortage is going to be around for another 10 years. Number 2, remote, hybrid, and flexible work arrangements are here to stay. As people re-gear their lives during the pandemic and don't want to go back to the way it was. They may have homeschooling, they may have elder care, they may have a variety of things that are now part of their day-to-day routine that would be really hard to change out. This is becoming a competitive advantage in the labor market for some industries. Back to that first point about the labor shortages. Number 3, baby boomer retirements and labor shortages will drive increased use of AI, robots, and automation to transfer that knowledge and to streamline highly manual work. But the other point here is the younger generations are attracted by technology. So it becomes an attractor, again, going back to that first point around labor shortages. Number 4, reactions to the vaccine mandates are raising many questions around societal safety versus individual preferences. Now, several organizations have come out and recently stated their position on vaccinations. Some of them are very, very strong. Number 5, the rise of health consumer and increased utilization of telemedicine will continue to challenge the traditional patient primary care physician model. And as we already know from the stats, and those of you that have responded to the poll today, telemedicine is definitely skyrocketing. And that's definitely putting more control in the hands of the health consumer. And if we can move on, number 6, organizations will need to digitalize key aspects of their business operations, especially the customer journey, or risk not being viable within the next 10 years. And this is going to require highly sought after digital skills, not just those skills to develop those systems, but to also operate them. And they are in the category of high demand, low supply. There's a labor shortage in those 2 categories for sure. Employee experience will become central to attracting, retaining, and engaging in workers, as Amy and Laura talked about earlier. And one thing here that's always stuck with me, and I heard this a while ago and it stuck with me, people decide within the first 3 months of employment if they will stay with your organization long-term. They may not leave right away, but in their heart, they've already kind of decided in those first 3 months if they're going to stay or not with you long-term. And you think about that onboarding experience is so critical. That's one of the first things they experience, not to mention some of the pre-employment things that Laura and Amy talked about earlier. Number 8, ESG will continue to rise in importance to address climate, societal and ethical issues. There are several service firms, startup service firms right now that are focused on providing ESG ratings. It's a whole industry that's developing. Number 9, data privacy will become a much larger issue as social media platforms receive more scrutiny. You can't turn on the TV or go to streaming media without seeing a commercial around data privacy and what some of the big players are doing about it and what some of the rising stars are doing about it. Then finally, number 10, DE&I and social justice movements will lead to pragmatic changes in workforce diversity, board member diversity, business financing, supply chains, and corporate governance. In many cases, there are artificial boundaries that have been in place that are being identified and removed as we speak. So moving on to dig into these a bit, I definitely want to do this poll, Chelsea. What strategies are you using to compete in a tight labor market? So if we could ask you to quickly annotate which of these are really primary for you right now. And if you're not in a tight labor market, then I guess we'll get a check mark from you, or however you want to annotate. We'll give you a minute to respond.
And again, don't be afraid to say other. You want to elaborate.
Thank you. Awesome. Yep. Terrific. Again, a good cross section here again. Chelsea, anything in the chat or Q&A area?
Nothing in the chat right now, Fred.
Well,
So it looks like H is the most popular option we have here, thinking, or a lot on A as well.
Yep. Well, I'm going to give away a stat that we're going to talk about a little later, but 70% of people recently polled that are in a situation where they can work remote or hybrid have said that that is one of their top 3 decision factors in choosing their next job, being able to work remote, hybrid, or have a flexible work schedule. Oh, awesome.
And
Right.
Fred, someone did say there's a huge focus on our culture. So
As another? Yeah.
yes.
So the person that shared that, if you'd like to either share more in the chat area or come off mute and share a little bit more, that would be awesome.
Hi, this is Sharon. I put that in there.
Oh, great.
Our company was recently merged with a company much bigger than our original size. So we're now 10,000 employees in 26 countries. And we're considering ourselves a $1 billion startup company. So we really just wanted to completely clear the decks and just reposition ourselves as an employer that people want to work for a lot of good reasons, but our culture is really the primary focus. I think all of this stuff fits in there up under culture, but it's really what kind of company do we want to be as a $1 billion startup in today's world? Not because of the way things have worked before, but really thinking out of the box, really thinking forward. How do we want to involve with our social programs? There's a lot of D&I initiatives, of course, in that scope. There's a lot of energy transition initiatives. So it's really what kind of culture do we have to stand up so that we can become that kind of company going forward? So less about programs and more about leadership behaviors, employee behaviors, creating social contracts with our employees to say, not only when we're hiring them and onboarding them, but, in order to advance, in order to get, promoted or be in succession plans or high potential plans, our really key focus is on behaviors to support the culture. And we've just done a lot of work for our employees to participate in building that with us. So I would say it's paramount, and everything else hopefully will fall up under it as perhaps a program or a policy, but the culture is really the focus for us.
So thank you for that, Sharon. If you don't mind, rewards and recognition programs related to the kinds of behaviors that you want. Are you looking at that? What kind of, have you made progress in that area, or?
We are the biggest one. We are a private company owned by private equity, so we're not listed on any exchange. But as of right now, it's really embedded in our short-term incentive plan that we're rolling out for 2022, where behaviors is predominantly showing up, that it can cancel your entire bonus. If the behaviors aren't there, you probably actually won't be around to get a bonus. But the behaviors are really trying to get really clear and articulate with those is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's not in place, but we're rolling it out for 2022. And as far as just employee advancement and typical promotions, because there's really no other incentive plan quite yet, although we'd like to think there'll be spot bonus programs based on, again, leading by behaviors, not just performance, but the behaviors that, get the performance that we want. So we're looking at those things for 2022, but I can't say they're actually all in place yet. So.
Well, when you said billion-dollar startup, that by itself is a draw. That's exciting.
Well, we're not technology, we're oil and gas, engineering, construction. So it doesn't have the sex appeal that perhaps a technology company would have as a billion-dollar startup. If anything, it has the opposite effect. People kind of run the other way when they hear oil and gas anymore. So we're really trying to create a different kind of experience for people in oil and gas. And that's really why we took the angle we are, especially with, the direction the world is headed with climate change and energy transition and all the things around working to save our planet. So it's a very big part of the work we're doing.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Really appreciate you sharing. So Chelsea, if we could move on. We had intended to kind of go through all 10 of these. In the interest of time, we're going to maybe cherry pick these a little bit. So I think we got to start with number one. Obviously, labor shortages will continue for several more years. 60% of organizations said they can't find applicants with the right skills. Keyword there is skills. 30% of job seekers say their skills don't match the available jobs. So we definitely have a void there. 42% of companies say they plan to launch upskilling or reskilling initiatives internally because of this. And in addition to it. So Amy or Laura, what are your short-term tactics and long-term strategies to address labor shortages, if in fact you're experiencing those yourself?
I'll take this one, please. We have really put a lot of focus on our intern program the last several years. It started out as a small business-specific program from the same schools. And then last year, we decided that this was really going to be the farm team of the future. We've got to bring people in early, get them interested. We're in engineering services, consulting. And so we started out during the pandemic with 200 interns, 30% diversity. We ended the program with 210 interns and 62% diversity, and we hired 30% of those individuals. And we did not have one single on-site visit. We identified 23 new 4-year schools, 2 2-year schools. We did tech talks, virtual tech talks, and we had 16,000 applicants apply for our 200 positions and interviewed 1,400 of them. We upped our game this year. We're up to 300 and we're at 53% of our goal and 61% diversity. And we really see this as our farm team. And we've even tied more of it to what percentage do we need to hire each year? What percentage do we want to bring back every year? We've added a few more schools, but I think this is one of the most effective things that we're doing to address our labor shortage.
And Laura, it sounds like, and it's kind of implied, but it sounds like you have a pretty detailed workforce plan sitting behind this with some scenarios that you've developed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We start early in the year and we go business by business and we look at their financial plans. We look at their hard backlog, their soft backlog, the types of talent, and we back into it that way.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's
Thank you.
also across the shared services. It's not just
Yep.
a business.
Yep.
We push it across everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Amy, anything you want to share with that?
Very, very similar experience with the internship programs and in the world of clinical, doing the clinical rotation programs. I will also say, in addition to, we've taken a step back and are really looking at, in a world where labor is more tight, how do we work more efficiently? And are there things that we can do to optimize what we're able to do with the labor we do have? So we've been engaged with our data scientist team, looking at OR efficiency and in-office and, business work efficiency. And that's led us to some good start, stop, continue conversations, right? How do we create bandwidth to work on the most important things, knowing that we have very likely will always be running a little light in some of those key areas where we would have historically had access to more talent.
Awesome. Amy, thank you for sharing. Anything in the chat area, Chelsea, or the Q&A area?
No, sir. Ready to move on.
Okay, in the interest of time, I definitely want to move on. We actually did have some conversations around remote and hybrid and flexible work arrangements. So if we can move on to the poll. So looking in your crystal ball out 3 years, what percentage of your workforce do you anticipate being hybrid or remote 3 years from now? And again, if you could use the Zoom annotation feature, kind of select the one that most aligns with your crystal ball view.
Fred, we do have a comment as people are voting.
Awesome.
April, thank you for messaging, said, we are also focusing on which benefits matter most to different generations so we can think differently as a leadership team. Culture study for us, outcomes are in process.
Chelsea and I were just having a conversation yesterday.
Yes, we were.
Awesome. Thank you for the ad. Okay, we got 60 to 80%, 40 to 60. And I realize that a portion of your workforce, depending on your industry, cannot work remote or hybrid, but for those that can, we're seeing some high numbers here. Yep. All right. Any other comments in the chat area, Chelsea, that may have popped up?
No, sir.
All right. Again, in the interest of time, not surprised by these numbers, by the way. We're seeing that in lots of different industries. If we can move on to the next. And so I want to, we could have an hour and a half conversation on the vaccine mandates and all of that. I want to jump right down to digitalizing the business, number 6. So as a result of digital transformation, companies on average are seeing an ROI of 17% at minimum, and 11% increase in productivity. That is a really, really good business case. Digitally mature companies are 26% more profitable than their competitors. Huge number. And spending on digital technology and transformation within the next 2 years is going to reach $2.3 trillion. That's staggering. That's about 10% of the US GDP right there. But I do want to come back up to the vaccine question just for a moment, because I know that's on everybody's mind. I know this is a sensitive topic. Amy or Laura, if you want to, if you feel comfortable doing it, how have you approached vaccinating employees as part of your return to work process, and how have you packaged that?
I'm happy to jump in. We, on the clinical side of things, it is very much what it is. The hospital systems create the rules, and our people are required to follow them. We have, though, with all the CMS turmoil and OSHA turmoil, we've seen the hospitals take a softer approach in the last couple of weeks to some of those mandates, and I think that's the right thing to do. Obviously, what I can tell you is inside hospitals, they've become extremely adept in understanding how to use PPE in order to ensure the clinician safety and the patient safety. On the business side, though, we've taken the approach, the board last August basically said they wanted our offices to be vaccine zones. But very quickly, we understood through our poll data that we had, at that time, in excess of 30% of traditional office employees that had no intention of being vaccinated or were not prepared to make that decision at that time and signal their intention otherwise. So we pivoted to, this is the world we're in. Our offices are open. If you're vaccinated, we would love to see you. If you need an accommodation for medical or sincerely held religious belief, we want to talk with you and pursue that process with you. But if you want to work remotely and your job allows it, work that out with your manager, and that's fine with us too. And so we really came to what does the role require? Does the role require some in-office presence? And if not, we've leaned towards maximum flexibility and allowing that individual to have a big say in where they do work.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Laura, anything you want to add to that?
Ours is very similar, but instead of it being a medical environment, it's a federal work site. And, other than that, we've taken the approach that it's an employee's decision. And we're managing it accordingly about who needs to be in office, doesn't, and following our COVID protocols.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. So Chelsea, anything in the chat area or Q&A area?
Nope, we're just running on 3 minutes left.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to jump all the way to slide 19 in the interest of time. Again, you're gonna receive this deck. So, during the past 19 months, we have proven that our organizations can be resilient. That word is being used over and over and over again, and it's true. And react quickly to changes. And we've had so many changes. We now need to become even more agile and proactively positioned for the opportunities and challenges ahead of us. Hopefully you're leaving today with from the Back to the Future discussion with some confirmation that you're already doing some things well and that you're well positioned for the future, or maybe you have some adjustments to make. Either way, try to maintain a fail fast mentality for things that you try that just don't seem to be working, and quickly ramp up those things that are working. Thanks for your curiosity and your great participation today, especially Amy and Laura. And my contact information and QR code are on the screen. I'd definitely like to hear more about your perspectives on the future. Now set your dials to 2022 as we prepare for another pivotal year ahead. And just like to say happy holidays and a brighter new year to everyone. And back to you, Cindy. And thank you, Cindy.
Welcome. Hey, Fred, thanks a lot. I got a feeling that we're going to need to do kind of a follow-up because I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. So you and I can talk about that. And Amy and Laura, thank you so much for being with us today. We really, really appreciate your insights. And Laura, especially from the New York airport, we really appreciate that. And thanks everybody for being with us. We look forward to seeing you guys in 2022. Okay. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye. Hey, Fred, you want to stay on? No, he left.